Okay,
Dan,
thanks,
do you-
Elizabeth.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes,
Yes.
we can hear you now.
Good.
All right, I'll bring up the.
Yeah, we should do a quick little introductory piece here too, right?
Yeah. Dan, would you want run the meeting? Because
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not on
sure.
my laptop. I apologize.
Yep. So this is a working group meeting of the funding task force associated with a larger task force here. Present in the meeting so far, I know he just took my personnel out of the way here, but we have myself, Dominic and Rick from Televate. We have Paul and Mike. Do we need to do a roll call, or do we? I can't remember how that works in these task forces.
I'll just say I'm here.
If you're here, please say
I'm
aye.
here. I'm here.
Okay,
Aye.
very good. So we verbally
Here.
acknowledged those folks that I mentioned. We're also joined by Elizabeth, who is running the meeting for us, and we have restarted the recording. So we will call this to order and turn it back over to the folks from Televate.
Okay, Dom, you want to go? You want me to take over? I mean, basically, we are, do we approve? We need to approve the agenda. Here's the agenda.
Yeah, the agenda was circulated. Does
Any-
anybody have any additions or corrections to the agenda?
Good with me.
All right. Hearing none, can we get a motion to approve the agenda?
Move we approve the agenda.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor of approving the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
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 Okay. Motion carries. And we'll go back to the guys from Televate.
Dan, we still need to do the meeting notes from last week.
Oh, damn it. That's right. Sorry. I apologize.
That's
So
all
those
right.
meeting notes were also circulated. Does anyone have any additions or corrections to the meeting notes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting.
Okay.
And
Do we have a
I'll
second?
I'll second.
All right. Second. All those any discussion? Okay. All those in favor of approving the meeting notes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Missing
Aye.
somebody. Okay, good. All right.
Sorry, it takes an
motion-
extra second for my phone to come off mute. I'm sorry,
Gotcha.
Dan.
Motion carries, and we will move on.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Mike and Paul. All right, so with that said, we are heading into the home stretch, and as we've gone through this sharing process, we are in our fourth meeting, and outside of any additional work we may have to do at the close of this meeting to prepare our presentation to the task force. Our goal is, we're on the agenda to present the preliminary recommendations of the funding and cost sharing group to the task force on Wednesday, which would be Wednesday the 19th, huh? So that's our goal, to finish up and to be prepared. If we do need an interim activity, we can get that accomplished. So we go to the next slide. These are the action items on the next slide. So we've completed the action items. The number 6 is still Paul has done yeoman's work of getting some additional input from Newport, and we've added Newport to the list, and we'll go through that quickly on the following page. So we've done that. I did reach out to Barb about setting up a meeting with Senator Harding. However, as you and Paul and you and Dan, and I haven't shared it with Mike yet, but I shared it with the two of you, and be happy to share it with you as well, Mike. But we did discover through the Modernization Act the Public Safety Communication Modernization Act of 2023, there was a Senate legislative group that proposed a very comprehensive approach that this Act 78 came out of. And so there is seems to be even larger body that we may want to talk to. And I think in our meeting on Monday, Paul and Dan, we should really talk about that. I don't know if you've had a chance to look through it yet, but it is very comprehensive and it was very thought out. And what the original Modernization Act looked at was even more extensive than what we may be talking about. So I don't think we need to talk about it today.
Yeah,
but
I think we should also keep in
Monday-
mind, however, that it failed.
Yeah. Well, out of it came Act 78, so that was in the back of it. But you're right. You're right. But anyway,
Well, I think that was, I think saying that it failed is even giving it too much credit. I don't think it
Right.
even went far enough to come to an up or down vote. It never left committee. And I think that certain pieces of it were pulled out and inserted into Act 78.
yep.
Act
They
Act
were.
78, Act 78, of course, being the big bill, the funding bill. And our piece of it is just a very small sliver of Act 78 that I think they selectively pulled out of that bigger bill that you're talking about, Rick.
Yeah.
But
That's
you're
pretty
right. But
interesting.
you're right. There is a lot of meat in there.
Yeah, and there's good nuggets, and I think there are things that we, especially around funding, I think there's good nuggets in there that we can pull from. I would be hesitant to present the entire thing or ask that some form of legislative action reconstitutes, because I think it didn't pass already. So let's take the good pieces and leave the rest.
Yeah, I agree. I just wanted to bring it up, but because it was, I haven't yet heard back from Barb about a meeting. So hopefully we, maybe out of Monday we can have discussion and see if we can get it on the table. The number 8 item was added last week, and that's Televate will do some cost modeling, and we've done that, and we're going to present that shortly. I don't know, Dom, do you want to go into that now, or should we wait until we get through the next slide? Yeah. So this is a slide we had before. We added in based on the work that Paul was able to get from Newport. So we did add in the Newport numbers, and they're in this, they're highlighted in the center. And so Newport provided us their cost $527,990, 253,112 out of their general budget. And then their fees through the dispatching fees, they raised an additional $274,878. And these are their various costs per incident fees to go ahead and their cost per incident based on what was reported. But this model has been updated, and in addition to this model, through the survey as we presented last week, we were able to capture some actual per town dispatching fees that they pay, and we're able to model that so that you can see, what when we talked about last week, to put together a formula on how to on funding, on fee modeling for dispatching. We'll put together a detailed formula for that. And I don't know, Dom, do you want to go through that now, or should we wait a little bit, or what do you think?
I think now is appropriate, if that sounds good.
Yes, please do.
All right. I will stop sharing and share a different window. Everyone can bear with me just a moment. Okay, I've got a spreadsheet here that we put together a formula, and this was based on discussion we have had previously, and also some of the analysis we've done, and I'll explain this. So the model that we put together is based on, there's actually four factors for each town, and this is done on a per town basis. and we looked at the towns that were currently not paying for certain dispatch services, primarily because they are getting them through VSP. As we discussed previously, and as one other formula that was recommended, the formula has this has 4 factors. There's a base fee that would be somewhat like a readiness fee, if you will. Looks like we lost Mike. Is he coming back in?
Yeah.
All right.
We got him back.
There would be a base fee. It's kind of like a readiness fee, because there has to be a dispatch center ready to serve. So that would be base fee. We have added in a fee for law enforcement dispatch. And that is actually based on population for this particular formula. And again, this is just one example, one potential thing to consider. The law enforcement fee would be based on population, and we have population as reported by town. There would be a fee for fire dispatch, and that would actually be based on the grand list, and we have developed the grand list based on what we downloaded from the Vermont site, and then also a fee based on or for EMS dispatch. So we've looked at the 3 different disciplines for dispatching: law enforcement, fire, and EMS. Each one based on either population. Again, we used population again for EMS. So law enforcement based on population, EMS based on population as well, fire based on the grand list. And the intent, first of all, was to look at the towns that are currently not paying for dispatch. So in other words, they are getting their dispatch for free from VSP. So those towns that are listed here, well, this lists all the towns in the state. And where there's a non-zero figure, that means those towns are getting their dispatch services from VSP. So for example, Addison, you'll see is getting law enforcement dispatched from VSP. There's 0 for fire and EMS, meaning that they pay some other dispatch center for fire and EMS.
But before we go any further, let me just ask about that. So
yeah, sure.
yes, Addison is getting their law enforcement dispatched by VSP, but that's because their law enforcement is VSP. They don't have their own police department.
I understand. Okay.
So are we proposing that towns would pay the state or the state dispatching their own personnel to that town?
That's what this would equate to if
Okay.
if we utilize this formula.
Okay.
However, Paul,
And this could be
However-
adjusted. I'm sorry, one more thing, but this can be adjusted by this factor. We have a different factor for law enforcement, so that can be adjusted to adjust this, reduce it, etc., based on certain items. Go ahead, Rick.
I just think we need to differentiate somehow between a town like Berlin or Randolph, right, where they have their own police department and the state is dispatching that department for nothing, versus a town like Addison where they don't have a police department. State police is sending their own personnel in as the default law enforcement agency. And we
Yeah,
would
that's a
potentially
good point, Paul. And
Yeah, I tend to agree with him as well.
yeah, maybe that's something we can take into account. We would need institutional knowledge that you would have
Right.
certainly to identify that.
Yeah.
But
I
that
think-
is not captured in
Sure.
this particular formula.
I think we're going to have a high degree of consideration that everybody's going to be opposed to these fees,
Yes.
from the governor on down. So I think what we have to think about is how do we make these as a modest move towards equity as opposed to an unfunded mandate that's burdensome to communities. And, I think Mike is going to be a very important voice on this as a voice of a community leader to say, when he looks at this and says, $10,000 to Addison, is that going to, what degree of consternation is that going to raise?
Right.
Well, I think like 44. I mean, a better example might be just to stay on the same track. It was $44,000 to Barnard. You know what I mean? Like, if we're replacing what they're already spending, fine. But that's a some of these, they're gonna have to be reviewed. Sorry, Dan,
I think that the other thing to consider is we're moving towards equity. It doesn't mean we have to make it equal on the first swing of after the
True.
we don't have to punch them out on the first swing.
Right.
So
it can be a
this could very well be something that we say, look, we're gonna institute a very modest fee that's going to help us fund some of this, with the idea that we're going to transition to this. We can readdress it later on and make it a little bit more palatable. Because
Absolutely.
we're going from nothing to everything. That's going to be a very harsh response.
So I'm curious
absolutely.
on that first example, I'm curious, why is Addison 0 for fire and EMS?
They're being dispatched out of another center.
Because according to our records, right, they're being dispatched. They're being dispatched by Shelburne for fire and EMS, so they are already paying for those services.
Okay.
That was the assumption here. Based on previous discussion we've had, we would look at assessing a fee where there's currently no fee in place.
Okay, so this chart is only showing new fees, not replacement fees.
That's correct.
Okay.
However, on another tab,
like for instance,
on another tab, we have modeled based on fees that were provided through the survey to try to equalize, to see how does this model fit against what's actually being paid by the towns. And so, we'll get to that shortly, but there.
Yeah, I wanted to get into that, certainly. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of explain this first. Like, for instance,
Absolutely.
Arlington has, has figures for both law enforcement, fire, and EMS, because according to our records, VSP dispatches all three of those services. That's why they're non-zero.
Okay.
And then, a place like Berry City and Berry Town, there's no fees shown here because they dispatch their own services.
Right. Well, Berry City dispatches their own, and Berry Town pays Lamoille.
Right, but they're paying someone other than
they're paying right. They're paying currently, right.
So as Rick mentioned, we tried to originally we had put that formula together and just put arbitrary factors in there to look and see how that would play out. But for the sake of equity, we did try and look at some existing costs that were reported. As Rick has shown previously, and we'll update it later today, the survey that was distributed earlier had some towns reporting how much they are paying for dispatch services. So we tried to look at that to get an idea of what is currently being spent, and tried to essentially adjust the factors here, the dispatch factors, multiplication factors, if you will, to match what towns are currently paying. We found out that in specific for St. Albans, we had a number of current data points. For instance, we know how much Fairfax is paying, what they reported, how much Milton is reported paying, Richford and Sheldon. we have those 4 data points. They all happen to be dispatched by St. Albans for, at minimum, fire and most for fire and EMS. Milton is also being their law enforcement is also dispatched uh, by St. Albans. So what we did was we adjusted these multiplication factors to try and match what the current towns are paying. So, for example, Sheldon reports paying 32,000 based on the model and the multiplication factors we inserted. Sheldon would be paying 32,000 based on that model. And for Richford, it's also close. Maybe a little bit off, but 31,000 versus they're paying 34. Milton is almost right on based on the formula. They pay 256. They're currently paying 256,000. In the case of Fairfax, this one based on keeping the same formula, of course, for all towns, it comes out a little bit higher, 80,000 versus almost 70, what they're currently paying. And as a check, these, based on our records, these are the towns being dispatched by St. Albans. St. Albans reports dispatch fees being collected of 848,000. And per this model, it would suggest 725,000. So not quite there, but fairly close. And again, this was used to take existing data points that we have and determine the appropriate multiplication factors to use for the formula. So those are the numbers that we used, and then to insert back into this page, which lists all the towns. Utilizing those same formulas that would be equivalent to what those towns being dispatched by St. Albans is currently paying. So that's how we structured the model. And as I mentioned, this it shows all towns. Of course, those that are already paying elsewhere or doing their own dispatch don't have any fees assessed. It would be just those towns that are having dispatch services provided by others that are currently not paying. And for interest, just using this particular formula with the calculated factors, this indicates approximately $3.5 million that is not being assessed today for these towns in question.
Under this formula.
And per this formula, and these are all the services being provided today by VSP, dispatch services provided by VSP.
However, we know now, based on the previous conversation of bringing it up, that we don't think we should charge towns that don't have their own PD at a similar rate. We could agree that we could change that factor, but we don't know what towns are or aren't dispatched or don't have their own PDs.
That's a valid point.
I can help you with that.
Yeah.
All right.
And it gets even more complicated because there are towns that don't have their own PD, but yet they might contract with some PD. They might contract with a sheriff, or they might contract with a neighboring PD. So it's not really their own, but yet they're not relying on the state police either.
I think this is the right way to go, though. This is really interesting. And, I think, listen, I'd love to put $3.4 million into the system going forward. But right. I think it's also reasonable to remember that we don't have to do that. Like with this, really what we're looking to cover is the ongoing costs of the items that we're asking for. So even if we aren't able to get to that high level, simply funding the CAD system and the ongoing, pieces here, that's I would imagine that's a substantially lower number annually than $3.4 million.
Oh, absolutely. Right. And that's originally where we started out with this formula, Dan, was to try and determine how to fund that ongoing those ongoing costs. And yes, the numbers were much lower to provide that level of funding. But then as a second thought, we took a look at, well, in order to strive towards
Yeah.
equity, uh, what would it look like if we were charging similar fees to what towns are currently paying for their service?
Yeah, I think that's correct.
So if I could add a couple of things, Dan, appreciate you brought that up. So, again, a goal, an underlying goal, and a pretty complex one to achieve is equity for the cost of dispatch services statewide. Right now, the modeling here, we're taking a look at those towns that aren't paying, but we're also looking at a more robust model that could work statewide, because right now there's a lot of competition going on, and some are paying more than others, and so we're like, well, how do we address that problem? And we're also missing, I think, another key variable in here, and that's the number of calls, per town. Because right now we've taken, again, it's arbitrary, but we've made the numbers work. We're looking at population, and we're looking at the grand list, but we're not
Right.
looking at the number of calls, which is another key variable that could be considered. We did reach out to Chris Pedoti to see if he could share any of that detail, because we're the only information we have now are the total numbers. We don't have them broken down by a town or by an agency, and we asked Chris if he had that information for his centers. But and I don't see how we can get around not considering the number of calls. If one town has a higher call for 911 calls than another, should that be modeled as well? And I know, and reading the Modernization Act, they were looking for 3 years rolling. Number of the folks that replied to the survey were also talking about consideration of the call volume and a rolling number. So if we did add in the calls, we could say, we're not going to implement this for 3 years. And then, all during that time, we're also going to gather the call volume per agency over that time, and model that into the cost as well. And I'm obviously, that's a little bit more complicated, but that's doable if we can, because I'm sure that data is being captured on that basis by the dispatch centers, or I would hope it is anyway.
Yeah, I would
At
think
least
it could cert.
if
I'm
it, yeah,
sorry. Go ahead, Paul.
if, no, if it's not, it certainly could be
Yeah.
gathered.
Right.
Going, if we knew that, okay, 3 years from now, we're going to be asking for these numbers, or we're asking these for the numbers starting now so that we can start billing in 3 years, it certainly should be capturable information.
Right. Right.
And that
Yeah,
that would give
that's
everyone a
one
long
thing.
enough runway, that they're not paying these fees. I mean, it does. So it is I think for some towns, they say, well, yeah, I appreciate that, but we don't have that many calls for service and compared to our neighboring town. And again, we could model it, and then we could ratio it, say, well, we're going to factor, you're going to give, weight this 40%, not 30%, this 40% to get to 110%. No, but anyway, to get to a number, and I don't know how you feel about that, but that's one of the other areas that we feel should be modeled, but we didn't have the data to model it at this time.
So we potentially discussed having a model that utilizes this data to start out with, and then potentially phase in call information once that data is accumulated. Anything else on this? Any other questions or thoughts?
Just to clarify that the law enforcement fee, column J, that's based on grand list only? Is that what you said?
That's based on population.
Population, okay, thank you.
We use the grand list for the fire calculation.
Okay.
And Don, why don't you go through the formula of how you've used it? Because we've totaled and then averaged,
No, it's simply a total, a total of the base fee plus the law enforcement fee, which is based on population and an arbitrary an arbitrary factor. And again, the factor was developed using the current data that we have, where we had data from St. Albans.
Okay, so it's like, so it's basically $7 a person for law enforcement dispatching.
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
Right. And then the fire fee is based on the grand list, and again some arbitrary factor. And again, these factors were adjusted based on what we see towns reporting that they're paying currently from the survey responses. And then EMS was also based on population. So the total is just these four figures together.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions?
so what, may I ask a question of you, gentlemen? What do you think of the idea of adding in the call volume?
As a metric to charge off
Yes,
of?
as another metric in the equation.
I mean, it makes logical sense from a standpoint of the more work you put in, the more, the more you can divvy that cost up. However, I am hesitant to have that be a heavily weighted factor.
Mhm.
Not necessarily because that means some communities will pay more than others, but more along the lines of the call volume can vary depending on the types of incidents that happen, right? It's none of it, a lot of it's predictable. It's trendable, but it's not predictable.
Yeah, and the age of your population is going to matter as well, because if your population is older, there's a higher probability that you're going to have more calls for emergency medical service.
Exactly.
But we would just want to be sure where we stand on this and what we want to present, what we're going to present to the task force from your position, whether or not that is a variable that should be considered.
I think long term, I think it definitely should be considered. I don't know that we could, since there's so many different places we would need to go to get that data, I don't know that we could collect it in time for, next month or next week or whenever.
That was our
No.
concern. Yes.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the thought that we wouldn't be collecting, we're not going to say, oh, yeah, we're going to start collecting this information next calendar year. You'd have to roll it out over a period of
Right.
time. And by that time, we could have multiple years of call data that you could average just and include in the equation if that's of interest.
Yeah, so I'm curious, there's so many towns in Vermont that rely on neighboring towns for services. Like, for example, I think the town of Orange, they don't have any emergency services of their own. Their law enforcement is provided by the state police by default. Their fire and EMS are provided by the town of Barry, but Barry doesn't dispatch itself. It relies on dispatching from Lamoille. So who should be on the hook for the dispatching fees? The town of Orange, the town of Barry?
Well, I mean,
So-
the answer to that question to me is the town of Orange, right? I mean, I don't know that they are on the hook for all of the fees, but again, I think if you're benefiting from a service, there should be at least some assignment of responsibility.
Right.
Right.
But so, right, so I think we or some future governance body maybe needs to develop a method of collecting this call data, the call numbers.
Yeah.
Because there's no one-stop shop where you can go and just run a quick query and find out how many fire calls, how many EMS calls, and how many police calls happened in the town of Orange last year.
Yeah. I think,
Right.
and it also, it plays into the notion of we have so few calls, we shouldn't have to pay anything. And that,
Right,
as I've stated many times, it scares me.
right.
Well, Dan, based on that, that's why we put in the base fee,
Yeah,
some base
right.
fee, some fee. Now that base fee is obviously could be variable as well. The base fee, might make more sense to be, charged based on the population size. If you're 1 to 5,000, you pay, X. If you're 5 to 10, you pay Y. If you're,
Yeah.
it could be based that way. You could say that fee is based on, the size of the population,
Yeah.
as a
I,
thought.
I think that's the right thing to do. And I like how you've done that. I think that makes a great deal of sense. Um, yeah, and I think that's how we address this is to say, yeah, the town of Orange may not have to be responsible for all of the fees, but you can't benefit from the dispatch, for another agency, and not have some skin in the game.
Right. One other question before we get back to the rest of the presentation. So as Dom and I went through the modeling of this, two things are at play. Those who aren't paying, and then equity for all. And so, we're trying to look at this from a perspective that we could drive to achieve equity across the board so that we could, kind of better temper the competition that goes on between towns and the various pricing between towns. And obviously that's, that would be a fine objective to achieve. And, you know, we certainly spent quite a bit of time thinking about, well, how do we get there, and whether or not it was necessary to get there. But because we were trying to find equity between those who don't pay and those that do pay, not just to get fairness at all pay, but is it, do you think, our objective that we need to come up with, some kind of strategy where we kind of equalize the cost of these services? We're standardizing the service delivery, but are we
Yeah.
also trying to achieve standardization in how we calculate, the cost, and what is a fair value to be paid?
Yeah. I don't think so. I think we want to have a nod towards that, right? So that we're not so far off that we're creating a disparity or, favored system in one direction or the other. But on the other hand, I don't think we have to create a communist model here where everybody, has exactly the same, especially when it comes to the notion that, these are private entities that can charge whatever the hell they want, and a community can choose to take their services or not. So I think there's a nod to it, but I think it would be a waste of time to try to get it so that everything is exactly equal.
So, Dom, can you go to the next page, please? So Dan, I hear you, and I don't want to run away from a really complex problem, but we've already heard from at least one of our PSAPs that say they can't afford to run their business, and because of a variety of factors, but they can't afford to run their business, and another PSAP is having trouble staffing its business, but if you look at this first column here, the current budget for Hartford, Lamoille, Shelburne, St. Albans, all except the Westminster and Williston, which their budgets are really expensive because they're not getting fees, and they're doing a lot of dispatching. But if you look at the cost of these services, if you take St. Albans at 1.5 million, and we spoke to the city manager, it says, I want to get out of this business. I don't really want to be doing this. I can't really charge of the right fee, and so we don't want to shut down a PSAP,
No,
but if we,
but nor can we necessarily control what they charge, though, right? I mean,
no,
we're not running them, and I think when we think about that organic movement conversation, I think some of this, look, if you can't afford to do it, this is an opportunity to do it with somebody else. I think there's some of
yeah,
that consideration that we should have.
yep. Yeah, I don't know. Dom and I wanted to be, and we wanted to get your, the working group's input in that because we're like, okay, well, how deep do we go in this?
Yeah.
So, okay.
I'm not saying ignore it, by the way. I think there is a consideration, and we should be, looking at it and trying to get close to it. But again, I think first of all, there's no way that we can make it entirely equitable across every single organization, especially given that we don't control those costs. And
Right.
secondly, I think getting to that micro level is going to be darn near impossible. So it's going to waste a huge amount of time trying to get there.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah,
the ones that are going to end up having to pay the fee aren't going to like it, of course, but I think a lot of other people, if we just make some attempt at starting to capture some fees, like, I know, the former Montpelier police chief used to, when I was the station commander, used to yell at me all the time about, when are you guys going to stop giving away dispatching for free? That could be a source of revenue for me. So there are some people that are going to like to see this implemented, whereas every town is paying something, even if it's small.
Yeah, I agree.
and with that said, collecting the money, how is the Westminster and Williston? How are they going to feel about collecting money, but not money not coming to them? That
Yeah,
continues to be funded out of the Department of Public Safety's budget.
right.
So,
Well, I mean, I think we're going to have to sell that, and I think the way we sell that is to say that the services that are not receiving money for this are benefiting from the addition of CAD and the other, structural implements that are benefiting the entire system. Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
they're not going to like it either. Nobody's going to like this. Let's be clear, right? This isn't. We're not doing this to make people happy. We're doing this because we have no other choice. So I think we just want to make that clear. But yeah, they're definitely going to push back.
well, depending on how much is collected, you could a proportion of fee back to them, a percentage.
Yeah,
But
that's what and
I think
we
that
talked
really
about that,
comes
that
if it comes down to
there might
negotiating.
be a capability to use some of this to offset cost in different places, and not just with state police, by the way. There may be a way to use this, and I think that would be a really I'm not sure it's possible, but if it is possible, I think that would be a really nice nod towards a more collaborative approach if we can do it.
Agreed. Um,
Well, and I think we haven't really talked about, or if we have, we haven't talked much about who is actually going to be collecting these fees. There needs to be some kind of a fiscal agent. And I think it would be that whoever that fiscal agent is would dole the money out to the appropriate dispatch agency, just like the 911 board currently doles out money to whoever, to the 6 PSAPs. Williston and Westminster get their share based on the number of positions they have. St. Albans, Hartford, the local PSAPs get their share based on the number of positions they have. Whoever our fiscal agent is could do the same. So, well, Williston and Westminster could receive some benefit of this.
Well, it's interesting you brought that up because the Modernization Act did cover the collection of and the distribution of. There were draft formulas in there for both of that. And the act was turning over all that responsibility of determining that fee and collecting that fee to the 911 board, the future public safety communication board.
Right.
That was in there. That was part of how it was. That's why I said it was pretty thoughtful. They went through the effort of considering all of those factors, and they were both in there. But the responsibility was provided to the future Public Safety Communication Board. All right, Tom, we need to keep rolling here. So I think we should.
Where do you want to go next?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not working at my normal spot, so I don't have the presentation up on my screen, but I think we should go to slide, um, what's 23? Let's look at 23.
It's the budget.
Yeah, well, we're gonna have to come back to the budget. Yeah, we're gonna have to come back to it. But yes, we're gonna have to look we need to look at that. But yeah, so let's be sure we know that one there. And let's go to slide. Sorry, yeah, go right there. No, not that one.
Was
Keep
it
going.
39 or no?
Yeah, keep going. One more.
Funding
One more
agent?
funding options. All right, funding options. Go to 39. You're right, 39. All right. So as we indicated, there was we're going to not, provide, not tell, the legislature where funding options were, but I want to be sure that we're in agreement that we could take out this potential revenue, but this is information that we would present, provide to the legislature, say, here's some options that we've thought about. I don't know what you think about this, but that's how it was, put together as potential options, an overview of them, and whether or not this is something that we want to continue to have, if we want to remove anything from here, but also what we would present back to. So when we're discussing this, not only it's a recommendation back to the task force for our presentation next week, or something that we might also offer for legislative consideration. I want to, get our input on any of these, what your thoughts are on this slide and any of the individual items on the slide.
Well, I'm going to say that, obviously coming out of the gate, the governor's going to oppose any implementation of any fee. So we're going to have to be sensitive to that, particularly Barb and I. The other piece is, I think the more that we can make this not Vermont based and more just sort of a list of other states or other situations are funding their systems in a model that looks like this, keeps it a little less personalized and maybe helps us
Mhm.
deflect some of that outrage that's going to come from those places.
Okay. All right, so we got a few on here that are. I mean, I know a number of municipalities sell bonds to support their radio networks and other fees. Obviously, bonds are bonds. I mean, you're getting money that you're going to pay back. So you're just, you're getting a cash outlay up front, and you're paying 3 to 5% for that opportunity. We've got, obviously, we have the Act 78 funds, and we got to talk about how we're going to spend them. There is a future opportunity to increase the USF, because we are still lower than some of our neighbors. And I think as an average, we're lower than the nation. But we already, just in July, we increased them. Right-of-way fees, that's something that I know there are charges. I'm not sure how that we use those fees, but I know that a number of jurisdictions pay, collect right-of-way fees. This idea of public service utility pole fee, this is, again, I took this one came out of the work that Paul did. And I mean, it's a potential option if we're not doing it today for poles that the state owns. State radio tower access fees. Yeah, if you want to rent out space in your tower, many jurisdictions lease space and collect money. There's a fee for managing it, but I don't know whether or not, that's something of interest. The car rental fee, that's something that I don't have any examples, but I think personally, I think tourists in general aren't paying enough for the benefits of the public safety they see. So I don't know what you want to do about that one. Airport fee, that's probably can get rid of that one. We talked about cannabis tax, that's probably beneficial to leave on. Motor vehicle and other violations, as I said, I know that Indiana if, for example, does add a fee, and that's how they fund their radio network, the building and operating of it. And I provided a couple of examples down here of special tax fees. And this funding document is there, but we know, Dom and I know directly, because we work for Yakima County, and they did it, they're gonna raise $40 million plus for their radio network, and the voters approved that in November. So that tax goes, that additional fee goes into play, I think the first of the year, Don, first of the year, January 1st, 2026.
That's right. Yes.
So
The
I mean,
last
these,
two are the ones that I think are the best. You know, like again, here's another system that's doing this. Here's an example of what they're doing. Here's the revenue that they're pulling in. I love that, and I wish we could do that. I know it may not be possible, but I wish we could do that for every one of these.
well, I have some other examples that I can put up here. I know on the bonds. Well, I mean, the universal fund, I'll do a little bit more research before, and then we'll do some research over the next day or two, to identify, because we know towers. I mean, we know that some states release out their towers for sure. I've got that. I'm sure we can find there.
Yeah, because then if we have it in that manner, then it's not us saying you should do this. It's just simply saying we've looked around, we're demonstrating models that are successful in other situations. You can infer whatever conclusions from that you want to take. I think that's a much more elegant way to get past the opposition of the governor in particular.
Okay. All right. All right. Fair enough. Let's see what else we got here, Dom. Um, mm, should we go back to, let's go back to the budget page now, Don.
Okay.
That's slide 23. All right. You should take this in the presentation mode too, because this is impossible to read without it.
Yep.
All right. So this one here, we agreed that we need a model like this, and we still are filling in some pieces here. For the cost, for example, we don't necessarily have actual costs, and we are gonna be reaching out, to the next day or two, going to be reaching out to this up here, tier three operations on budget for training and backup dispatch staffing. Also, there was as we shared with that group, Corey had made a budget out of the COPS grant, to improve the phone system at Williston and Westminster, as well as what he added to improve cybersecurity. So we already added the cybersecurity one into this budget because we think it's prudent, but based on what he had identified as a need, that it probably exists at the other other PSAPs. So we kind of borrowed that, but Barb also reached out about the phone system yesterday, and so I provided her some background on Corey's problem and how he was solving the problem, and I expect to hear back from her. So that's possible. It's possible that she would recommend adding in that fee into tier three operations. I don't know if I have an answer from her yet, but that's possible that could be added in. So with that said, we came up with some preliminary numbers and a strategy here. And then of course we still have this land mobile radio, $3 million in there. But based on what these costs are and how we structure this is going to be important. not only for upfront investment, but for ongoing investments and how to best leverage these funds, because we don't want to hand them back. So we want to have a plan for spending them. And before we prepare our presentation to the task force, I just thought we should spend a little bit of time on this in this budget as well, and get your thoughts on how best to present it.
Well, I think I like it. I think it's very important that we have this budget, and I think this is going to be the highlight of our work when it comes to making a presentation to the legislature, because what we're saying is these are the things that we have universal consensus on, and things that we think will make the most difference. I think we need to drill it out a little bit more. There's a couple pieces here that I still don't understand. The backup dispatcher fee is a little confusing to me. I'm not exactly sure what we're paying for there. But I think some of those things. But in general, I think it's good. I think the more detail we can fill it out, the better.
Okay.
Yeah, and
When you say detail, go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
no, I was just gonna say, I think that, calling out, making sure we have the line item, and I'm just looking to make sure, 'cause I think you do, but like if we're gonna cover some of the operations that's called in there as well. You know what I mean? That's actually in the budget for a period of years.
Oh, you mean the one we just talked about? That or ongoing operations of the?
Yes, right. So if we're going to cover the ongoing operations, it's going to deduct from this 9 million or 10 million or whatever it is.
I know you brought up a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we look at governance in particular, or we can look at any one of these. Again, if we agree to a line item, then over here post year one, there's also an estimate ongoing. And we could, say upfront load those costs. For example, let's just take CAD. Based on the ROM budget we got, say it's uploaded $2 million, we need an additional $1 million over the remaining 4 years. So you could load all that money up front into CAD. You could get a better deal of paying it for up in front, but that's 5 years. The budget we received was for a 5-year cost. So on the governance, the same thing. There were costs here, and that we looked at modeling them, and we could use, again, budgeting money for governance out for a number of years. We did the same thing for standardized dispatch training, and for dispatcher staff backup. So on this line item here, Dan, backup dispatcher staffing, that was a recommendation out of the group in order to provide backfill dispatcher support during a training session or some other outage that the staff wasn't available. And so the operations group discussed about having a PERT team that could fill in when needed, either because I'm sending my staff to training or that I've got illness and I've been hit and I don't have enough staff. And that's what that was for. But we're trying to get further confirmation. They haven't provided any input into those dollar values.
Yeah, I think that's awful complicated too. I mean, who do they work for? Personnel costs are not simple at all. Whether it comes from benefits and I can only imagine that that's not going to be a simple expenditure.
Right.
Yeah, we try to model it based on a $50 an hour cost. Therefore, how many hours it would be. We'd have X amount of hours of people. Yes, who do they work for?
Are they on call? I mean, there's so many things.
Yeah, there's models where people existing resources, existing dispatchers can be used in other situations. For example, they would volunteer to be available to take on another shift. Maybe
Yeah, I mean, I
there's a
understand the
number of
concept, but
part-time.
like for instance, though, if you're going to use state dispatchers and you say we want you to be available, the first thing the union is going to say is, well, are they on call? Are they on standby? I mean, and all of those things have a cost to them.
Right.
There's, administrative costs to who's going to schedule them. What system are we using to make sure they end up in the right place? Are we paying them to drive from Williston to Barry? Again, I think this is really, really complicated, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that may be a bridge too far, unless
Yeah.
we're able to have a very clear and concise breakdown of all of those costs. Which, good luck to you if you can.
Well, I think we're going to be sending out, as a result of the task force meeting request yesterday, to send out to the task force, these particular items, and we're going to send that detail along with the spreadsheet, either fill in the costs and or to provide a comment on it. So that's going to come out. We
Yeah.
should get that, and that'll come out, I would think, not later than tomorrow, but there'll be an opportunity for everybody to weigh in on that. So we don't disagree with you that it's a complex management.
And I don't think it's a bad
could-
idea, mind you. I think it's just really challenging. I think that, just from an administrative standpoint, it's incredibly challenging. And, I don't know.
Yeah.
There may be some simpler ways to think about it.
Yeah. So what about the thoughts of Mike? I think you were getting to this. Your comment was back how to leverage these, additional balance of these funding
That's right.
for post year one.
Right. So right now it looks like, out of the, you add up all the upfront investment or funding balance, there's, a couple mil left, right? Was it 3 or 4?
Yeah.
I'm done.
It's four
Then
million,
we should
yeah.
start
4.150.
right? So then we should say, year one, X amount of that millions that are left goes towards, supplementing operations. Year two, it's a smaller amount. Year three, it's a smaller amount. And that way you get kind of, as to Dan's point, you get that upfront spend, and it shows the legislature and those that are going to be running this, look, we've got a way to cover those costs, right? And get people ramped up.
And it takes the wind out of the sails of, oh my God, you're going to break my budget, and this is an unfunded mandate. And you go, no, we're giving you 2 years to get prepared for this. As an
But put that right in the budget, like it's a thoughtful, instead of it's an afterthought.
Yeah.
We want it to be a forethought, right?
Correct.
And should we put that into a governance budget, or where do you want us to park that funding at?
I think it
Well,
probably
it's
has to be its own category, right?
Yeah, own category. Makes sense. All right. So we can get this done and back out to you so that you can get some feedback on it tomorrow. And then, maybe we can just via email, go ahead and say, I think we should do this or be that, or we could do a quick phone call follow-up in advance so that we're prepared for next week. But we can model that and forward it out. All right, Don, we've got 20 minutes left, so let's go to the last. I think it's going to be slide. Well, I don't know the numbers now. We got so many slides in there, but it's right. It's towards the end. It comes in after next steps. Oh yeah, no, go to the one before. We'll go to 43. 44. All right, so last week when we went through this slide here, so this slide here was basically the towns that had, where managers from the various towns that reported on what they're paying. And then to the, to the list of items on the right was their, how they thought it should be modeled, the cost modeling. And so, we went through and just said, no, population loans, not good enough. Call volume loan, not good enough. Grand list, not good enough. Population plus call volume, population plus call volume multi-year, population call volume grand list. We went through this model here, just say, okay, we should consider these. And then there was this more complicated one that we took a look at earlier. And again, this came out of that Modernization Act. And so the architects of that were looking at a more robust, even looking at at the state for having to make some additional contribution on an annual basis. So this obviously is a bit more complicated than the ones above, although it has many of the same elements. It just also includes this statewide base fee that we modeled $1,000 for earlier. But I think, and then you think are we in agreement that you think we should have, say, three fees, 1,000, 3,000, 5,000, or some model like that based on the size of the population for the base? So this is for.
I think having a base fee we don't need a lot of complexity with that, right? If you're going to participate in this program, a base fee of $2,000 or whatever it is, 1,000 is probably fine. And then the algorithm can be for the more complex, the other components. That just means that we need to set the base fee to something that everybody can afford, and then the algorithm needs to compensate, right? But I do think that, and sorry to speak up on this too much, but like, if you look again at the RRPC example, most RRPCs charge per capita for their base fees now, but they all used to start at that $1,000 or $1,500. So if we were to start this program in year one, setting the base fees for all these communities at like $1,500, I think they could stomach that. I think they'd be, or even $2,000, right? And then year two, maybe the base fee is $5,000 and we're supplementing 3 of the 5 or something like that. But we have to think about it. There's 240, 252 municipalities. I should know this. I'm not the governor, I'm the mayor. 252. So 252 municipalities in the state of Vermont. So that's $252,000 if everybody's participating, right? So we just have, the basic math needs to work. How much do we need for core operations without the extra stuff? If it's 4,000, then that gets us, about $1 million, which is pretty good as a base. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think there's a piece of this. It's also sort of like the face value of equity. And I think the more we start getting into population and changing it, the further afield we go from that. I think you just set it, and that's the pay to play.
I'm gonna start with just some side dishes. I'm gonna have
Okay.
some green beans.
All right. Okay, go to the next 2 slides up, Don. All right, so we're going to close out on this slide. I think, let's see here. We come up how best to equalize the cost of dispatching. I think we've addressed that. And we have an equitable plan for those who aren't paying, and that we've agreed that we think through our approach that there'll be some regionalization. So we don't really want to, there isn't no strategy to come up with an equitable fee for dispatching statewide. So we're good there. How best to allocate the remaining Act 78 budget. We have a strategy there, and we're going to go ahead and model what we've discussed today. And anything on the position on legislative funding request. I think we've gone through that already. in terms of how we're going to spend it. But any of you think in advance it makes sense to identify any champions at the legislative area that we should reach out to in advance? Is that part of what on the funding side? Is there any any thoughts on finding champions? I mean, we had champions in the past, or we wouldn't have an Act 78. Is there any thought in your end that we should try to identify and communicate with in advance any legislative champions now?
I think Barb and I are going to have a difficult time doing that. I think we're going to get reeled in by the executive suite on that one.
Mhm.
So I would say from my perspective, no. But I'd be interested to hear what everybody else says.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, Rick. We had champions 2 years ago,
Mhm.
but with the shakeup in the State House and certain key people losing their committee chairmanships and their positions of leadership, I'm not sure that we have any anymore. In fact, the people who now hold those leadership seats, I'm not sure that some of them are even aware of us. So I
Right.
don't know who I would go to search out a champion.
Yeah, I raised the question because I don't know. I know less than you know, so but I just to echo what Dan said. Yes, you and Barb might be in the hot seat, but the representatives of PSAPs and law enforcement and fire. I mean, we have some of those members on our task force. And bringing. I've never seen a meeting that doesn't go better when we don't have any badges and what was it, the uh, axes and anyway, yeah, bringing the first responders into this makes a difference, and I don't
Yeah.
know if we should tee up any of those for support. I mean, obviously, when we create what we give to the legislature, it's not what I'm talking about. That I'm talking about any post meetings, but members of our task force represent fire and police, and certainly the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. So if we think that we're better off with what we do to include those in the task force that don't put you, Dan and Barb, on the hot seat, maybe we should engage them and think about what the strategy might be to use them, including at the league, who from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns would be involved
Yeah,
outside of Mike.
I think that last point is key, and the work that we're doing affects all municipalities. It affects it affects municipalities maybe more than it affects state agencies. So
Mhm.
if we could get, the full bore support of the league behind this, and the league has paid staff or contracted staff for lobbying, um, they might be able to help us identify who we should approach as a champion, for lack of a better term.
I don't know what do you think, Mike?
No, I think that I don't have an
I don't,
opinion.
yeah, I know the league used to have their own in-house lobbyists, and they opted to contract out instead a couple of years ago, but I don't know who they're using now, but
I mean, Josh
they,
and Sam could certainly do it, but we would need to sit down and go over this with
yeah,
them.
well, I'm just wondering if did they have the pulse of the State House to know who should we try to win over to help us sell this?
Let me, why don't you put that on my to-do list for the next meeting? I don't know. I know we are short on time, but I'll call Josh tomorrow.
All right, and we signed you up for an action item. So we are not having another meeting unless we do a short one prior to the task force meeting, which we could do,
Right.
which is next Wednesday. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we could have a brief after we, put together our draft, which is the final one, and read their funding and cost sharing working group material presentation to the task force. And Dom and Elizabeth can put together, the few slides that we think, represent what you want to present to them. We could have get them out to you, I don't know, end of business Monday, the latest or sooner. And then we could have a brief follow-up if you want to, and maybe by then you might have an answer. But that would be our only opportunity as a working group to have another meeting. And then we wouldn't call that a meeting. I'd just say that's a powwow.
Yeah, I don't know that
So
we
with
need
that
another
said,
meeting. I think we can just go right back to the full task force. I don't know that we need another meeting of this group.
okay. All right. So with that said, then, Dom, I feel pretty comfortable about what we need to put into the presentation.
Okay.
I don't know if there's anything in specific, Dan, Paul, or Mike, that you would want to be sure that we covered. And if so, let us know now.
I think we did today. I think we did a good job of giving you feedback. We can make
Yeah.
some additional iterations at the next meeting, and not doing another meeting of our group is going to probably be better for me. Just my schedule next week really tight. And then the
Yeah.
holidays, so. But I will say that I will talk to Josh and Rick, if you want to follow up with me by the end of the day
Yeah.
tomorrow, I'll try
All
to
right.
get you an answer. All right.
All right, fair enough.
Because, the league isn't going to want to put their stamp of approval on this without fully understanding what it means for the municipalities. But,
Agreed, Paul. Agreed.
Well, the good news is that if we're gonna have time because we've short spaced the meeting before the task force meeting before Thanksgiving, so I think we'll be okay. Are you gentlemen in agreement that we just get a draft set of slides out to you, and that we could via email you could provide comments?
Yep.
yes.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, I'm gonna have a hard time fitting in any extra meetings between now and next Wednesday. In fact, I may not be able to attend the huddle on Monday.
All right. I sure hope your wife is doing better.
Yeah, we're hopeful of being discharged late today, but then we have to figure out when is a good time for her to endure a 900-mile road trip home. So,
Oh, jeez. There is
Yeah.
no good time for that. Just stay, Paul. Don't go anywhere.
yeah,
Good point.
yeah.
All right. If we're in agreement, Dom, let's take it back and close,
All
to
right.
the opening agenda slide and close it out.
Okay, I'll do that. Okay, so schedule for next meeting, we decided we're not having another meeting of this group at this time. Public comment, I don't see anyone from the public in attendance. So I think that brings us to adjournment.
Well, I will make a motion to adjourn and do it
I will
correctly.
second.
All right. Thank you very much. Elizabeth, we covered at that time, right? Anything else that we didn't do that we need to do?
Nope, that was perfection. Thank you.
Well, let's not go that far.
Okay. I'm gonna hop off, guys. Thanks very much.
All right.
Thanks,
All right,
everybody. See you
thank
next
you,
week.
guys.
Bye.
Bye now.
Have a good one. All right. Goodbye.